Dude, if you ain't got no clients, what do you got to lose? Never miss an opportunity because a paycheck isn't attached to it. I knew that if I just was willing to do work for free, that the rewards that I would reap from that would be way bigger than any money could pay me. People don't do their research, and they will pay 5 grand, 10 grand, 20 grand to go on these podcasts because they have millions of followers. Matter of fact, it will end up hurting your brand. There's always 3 things I tell people when it comes to getting on a podcast. So that's the first thing, audience alignment. And if you're gonna pay for it, you better damn well ask the host, who's your audience, okay? Second thing is topic relevance. Take a look at the podcast and say, do they actually talk about topics that I talk about? Or something similar to that? Because if they don't, then the chances that the audience is gonna be interested is low. But here's the thing that a lot of people do not understand. The last point is so important.
All right, I'm sitting with the #1 podcast agency owner here in the world. Record month was 300K. So today we're going to discover how you did that. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm pumped to be here, man. Thanks for having me on. I just want to say before we even get started, I admire you as a podcast host. And for everybody that's listening, watching, wherever you are, YouTube, subscribe to this man, leave a comment. Before I was coming, man, I was just on a walk and I was listening to a bunch of the stuff that you had online, and you asked some really great questions. So I'm excited for this conversation.
I appreciate it. This is only if you like marketing nerd stuff. So if it's just about general self-development and all that kind of stuff, don't subscribe. But yeah, if you love that stuff, then you love that stuff. So yeah, let's get into it. You did, in your best month, 300K. And it's not like it took you 5 years. So what I want to do is I want to take every little step that you took to hit that 300K month. I want to reverse engineer that. So let's get started with not your personal story. I love to do those at the end because we first want to do the nerd shit. So when did you decide, hey, I want to do something with podcast, or what kind of sparked your interest into let's do, help people with their podcast?
Yeah, so really where it started was out of sense of desperation, like a lot of other business owners. So I was in the military here in the US, and I got really good at being able to tell my story and really master the art of storytelling, which I learned from a guy by the name of Les Brown, really big motivational speaker here in the US. Long story short, I started teaching people public speaking, how to tell your story, communicate your message. But the biggest problem that I had was I would teach them the skill, but they never had a platform to be able to share that message. So it would frustrate the hell out of me. I had a 25K month when I was doing that business, teaching the art of storytelling. The business was called Storypreneur.
How long was that ago?
This was about 2.5 years ago now.
You just got out of the military?
I was still in the military.
You were doing this next to...
Yeah, I was doing it full time.
That was a grind.
Full time, active duty Army officer. It was definitely a grind. Anyways, I'm a big believer that a lot of the times we are not where we are simply because of who we are. And at that time, I had my first 25K month. I was so pumped. And I quickly had all of these thoughts that came into my head. I can't do it again. That was lucky. No one's going to pay me that much again. And for 6 months, I completely shut down that business and I made $0. I was driving home one day and the author of Atomic Habits, forgot his name, James something. He says, the podcast host asked him a question. They said, James, what is something that you say no to all of the time? And James says, well, that's funny you asked that because the one thing that I say no to are public speaking engagements. The host looked at him like he was crazy. He says, that's why I charge people $200,000 an hour, so that so few people could say yes. And they said, James, I got to ask you a question. Why would you say no to 200 grand an hour? He says, because when I speak in a room, the work dies. In other words, no one really outside of those walls is going to hear the impact of my message. And this is what got me into it. He said, but you see what we're doing right now, right here on this podcast? The host said, yeah. He said, in a year from now, somebody could hear this. They could buy my book. 5 years from now, they can hire me to come speak and pay me 200 grand. He says, the question we need to begin to ask ourselves is, what is the work that when I do it just one time will continue to work for me forever? And the moment he said that, boom. I said, everybody else that teaches the art of storytelling, they all focus on getting on stages. But there's nobody really focusing on helping business owners get on podcasts. And that was the moment that I had the idea, but then it was a couple of more months, I wasn't qualified. How am I going to do it? I started talking myself out of it. It wasn't until I went to a Funnel Hacking Live conference that Russell Brunson said something that really just changed everything for me. And that was really the springboard to getting started.
And what did he say?
Yeah, so it was the very first conference. It was a funny story because I was really broke at the time. But something within me was like, I'm gonna get a brand new C8 Corvette. So I got a Corvette. I called the bank. I said, can you please delay payment for 60 days? Because I can't make my first payment. So I show up to this nice fancy hotel it's Corvette C8. I wanted to be the guy to park it in front. Anyways, I was like to the valet, I said, how much is it to park? He said, you tell me. When a valet tells you, you tell me, you know he wants a lot of money. So I went to the ATM. I put my card in. It said denied. I said, there got to be something wrong with this ATM. Take it out, put it back in. Denied. I said, it's not the ATM. It's definitely me. But I say that to say that that's where I was at the time.
Yeah.
And I believe that I would have stayed there for another couple months until I heard Russell say this. He said, what happens is God will give you a vision. And he's going to say, you're going to see somebody doing something that you admire and you say, I would love to do that. But what's going to happen is there's going to be such a dichotomy between where you are and where they are. You're going to say, I have no idea how that's going to become my reality. But what happens is he will plant a seed in the form of an idea. And I heard that. I was like, well, first was the storytelling. And then what he said was this. What happens is God looks and he says, is Deven going to be a good steward of this idea? Is he going to take action? Or is he going to allow the devil to talk him out of everything? Mm-hmm. And if you take action, God will reward you with a bigger idea. So when he said that, I was like, man, I've been sitting on this idea for the past 2 months and I haven't done anything. And you know what was funny about ClickFunnels? I remember walking down the runway that they have with like all of the 2 Comma Club X and these guys. And I was so pissed because I knew I had it in me to be one of them, but there was something stopping me. But when Russell said that, I said, I need to be a steward of this idea and take action. So that's when I left. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what to do. I had my own podcast, so that was part of it. I was like, okay, I'm kind of familiar with it. I went to a guy named Tanner Chittister, big in the online marketing space. He was one of my coaches at the time. And what I did was I went behind his back and I started booking him on podcasts without him knowing. So I booked him on like 5 big podcasts and I went to him. I said, Tanner, I have these podcasts. He said, I'm not paying you for these. I said, Tanner, I don't want to be paid. I just want an opportunity. But I did it strategically. So every time I booked him on a podcast, I did a lot of in-person shows. So I would travel. I'd put it on the credit card. I didn't have no money at the time, right? I was like negative $231 and it's a terrible situation. But I was taking photos everywhere I went and posting it online. Yeah. So now everybody saw me with Tanner, power of association. And that's when it started. That's when I first started to get clients, was because people saw me with Tanner. They immediately viewed me as more credible. And therefore I became the guy that people came to when they wanted to get on podcasts.
Let's dissect that a little bit more. So you paid Tanner for like fitness coaching or business coaching?
Yeah, business coaching. Yeah, I actually started with him when I was still doing the Storypreneur.
Yeah.
And I just like re-upped to stay in his program. And he was away at the time traveling in Africa. So I didn't really interact with him. Yeah. But when he came back, that's when I was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And that's the thing I think a lot of people don't understand. I remember one of my watching somebody on stage. His name is Neo Davis. He's another name in the online marketing space. He says, never miss an opportunity because a paycheck isn't attached to it.
Yeah.
I knew that if I just was willing to do work for free, that the rewards that I would reap from that would be way bigger than any money that Tanner could pay me.
But like, you got Tanner's number, or you just reached out to him on Instagram, or like?
Yeah, so I was very active in the community.
So
he would know me. I would go to all the sales training calls, every call, I was there. So he knew me. Like I made it a point, like you're gonna know me. And then he was also like close by in Miami. So I was like, dude, I got this one in Miami for you, this, that, and the third. So yeah, I just hit him up. I sent him a message on Facebook. I was like, hey man, I got these podcasts for you. And then at first he was a little skeptical, but when I started like actually bringing these big name entrepreneurship podcasts to him, he was like, oh, yeah, I'll do this. And then I just tagged along with him.
Got it. And did he like communicate that he was getting a bunch of views or follower growth or revenue from those podcasts? Or was there any feedback loop there?
Not really. Not really.
It happened.
Yeah, not really, right? Like I remember what we were in a cab once and we were going from a podcast. He was like, how did I do? I was like, man, you did really good, but I think there's some stuff we could work on. And then we just like started to dive in the stuff that he could work on. And I'm glad you brought up that point, because that's a really big thing that people run into, is they think it's just about getting on the podcast, but they don't understand it's about the actual performance on the podcast. So that's really where it started, man. I shot him that message. He was skeptical, but I went to work. And it was actually an Alex Hermosi interview with Andy Frisella that really inspired me to want to do stuff for free. And I think so many people are afraid to do that because, I'm worth more. Dude, if you ain't got no clients, what do you got to lose?
You are no worth nothing.
Nothing, exactly. So gather testimonials. And I did that for some of the big name people that I worked with. And like when I first got started, it was like, let me just get as much social proof as possible, because once they, power of association, once they see that I did work for you, subconsciously, that's going to make them trust me more.
But how or why you're paying for all this stuff then? Like
credit cards. But for the podcast, this is what I always tell people. Luckily, Tanner had about 500,000 followers on Instagram. What I always tell people is the way you get on these big name podcasts is either one of two things. You either pay with your brand or you pay with your dollars. Yeah. So luckily for him, I was able to leverage his brand to get him on the podcast. Other people, I have to leverage their dollars in order to get them on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I meant like, how are you like, you were like just booking free podcasts for him. You were still like getting like 5 to 10 to 20K from your storytelling business.
I was just living off the army money. Right. All Luckily, I was full-time active duty. So where I was living was only costing like $1,500 a month. And then the military paid me well enough that I could support myself, luckily, but I was not in a really good spot financially. So when I finally had my first good month, it felt like I was released from prison. It was great.
Oh man, I respect that so much. Like people who save up some money and then just go for it. Like just no freaking extra income, 100%. That's cool. So you started posting selfies with Tanner on Instagram, I assume, Facebook. Or did you already have a little bit of an audience, or that's just how you started?
Not at all. What had happened was I went and I just started taking these selfies, and I just started writing like long form posts on Facebook, just about what I was doing and like how I was getting started and all of this stuff. And I had no clue what I was doing, man. But I knew one thing, I was going to try to do something.
Yeah.
So I posted on Facebook, and sure enough, like people started commenting like, can I have more information? I was like, I guess I got to put together an offer now. So what changed everything was I went to Tanner's house in Miami. He was doing these 1 hour long like in-person masterminds. He was just using it for content, completely free. He helped me put together my offer. He helped me put together my pitch, and he helped me put together my fulfillment. That changed everything. So now I had something to offer. I knew how to sell it, and I knew how I was going to deliver on it. And then now I just started getting these clients from Facebook, and I started out at like $7,500, first client, $7,500. And I was like, oh, wow, that person bought. Well, what if I charge a little bit more? And then what if I charge a little bit more? But obviously, along with that, increasing the level of value that I provided as well was very important. But yeah, that's how it started, man. Facebook.
And that was your first podcast offer?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you were placing people, or you were also teaching them, training them how to do a podcast, or?
Yeah. Remember, my background was in storytelling.
Yeah.
So
you did both?
Both. Yeah. Because
Right.
I believe
Yeah.
you can't do one without the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, we dive into both really, really hard. And I focus so much, like booking the podcast, we do that incredibly fast. But I need to make sure that you're prepared to go on that podcast and maximize the opportunity that you have there.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, so you started selling for like a couple of $100, a couple of $1,000. Was there like a next pivotal moment where like something happened and like you bumped up the revenue?
Absolutely.
Again?
Those leads from Tanner didn't last forever. So I was like, oh boy, this well is drying up very fast.
Yeah.
So now I had to figure out, well, what am I going to do next? And I'll never forget it. I don't know how I came across the guy, but Alex Berman, big name in the cold email space. He wrote a book called The Cold Email Manifesto.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think I came across his YouTube somehow. I was looking up like how to grow my business. And he was talking about cold email. I'm 27 right now. At that time, I was about 25. Cold email to me sounded ancient. I was like, yeah, that's like for old timers, like nobody uses email. But I bought his course, which was $97, and I put together my very first cold email infrastructure. I got instantly.ai. I was learning how to build lists, doing the whole thing. And sure enough, it was wild. I remember first time I got somebody on a call. They booked a call, and 45 minutes later, they paid me $20,000. I was like, what just happened? I sent an email with no face. They didn't know who I was, and they just paid me $20,000. And that's when I started to really dive into cold email. So that was the next transition when I actually learned how to market. Because previous to that, it was just like layup deals because they were just coming from association. But now I actually had to learn how to market. So that was the next phase was now I had cold email. And alongside that, now that I was getting more clients, I was having to build a team for the first time. So that was really the next phase that I dove into was breaking into cold email and, you know, turning it from something that's esoteric in my mind to something that I was like, holy moly, I can actually make some real money doing this.
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful moments when you get your first deal from like cold traffic or from someone that didn't know you at all within like a couple of days. Then you're like, man, if I can just keep doing this, I'm good.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
So then from that point, I had to learn some things the hard way, which was fulfillment.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was it was just me and a couple of VAs. I was steering the whole ship. I was doing the whole
VAs from where? Which country?
Philippines. I love them. They're the best in the East and the West. I love them.
Same. Yeah.
They're freaking awesome. And I remember I posted online that I needed an executive assistant. I didn't need an executive. I don't know why I thought I needed an executive. You know what I mean? Like people, I need a VA. No, you don't. Not really. And a woman DM'd me on Facebook. Her name was Kayla. And she said, hey, I would love to apply for the position. And she came on and she didn't do anything VA. She helped me optimize onboarding. She helped me just streamline all of my fulfillment. And I actually didn't sell anything for like 2 or 3 months because my fulfillment was kind of taking a hit. And that's one of the things about me, man. I take my clients' results like super personally. And even to this day, like some days I'll go like, some weeks will be really tough for me if like a client had a bad experience on a podcast or something like that. So for me, that's one of the biggest things that I've personally had to overcome is like not allowing a bad experience or this thing happened to really stop my momentum. That's been a constant growth curve. But that was the next step, bringing on the team, scaling to cold email. And then after that was running ads. And I was terrified to run ads, man. And guess what happened first time I ran ads? My account got hacked.
Oh, fuck.
My account got hacked. I had no access, and the guy was spending like $2,000 a day on the account. I was scared out of my mind. Finally, after about 90 days, I got access back to the account. Started running ads again.
Wait, so did you lose that money or did you get it back from the credit card?
I got it back.
Okay,
Thank
that's
God.
good.
Yeah, thank God. And then after that, I started finally running ads. And same experience as cold email. Boom. Within the first week, sale. So I started going all in on ads. And that's kind of the progression and then building the sales team. And it was just like a constant evolution and constant growth. But the biggest spike definitely came when I started running ads. And I'll tell you why, because in my industry, there's nobody really running ads.
Yeah.
So people started to see me and they were like, oh, wow, like this is the guy. This is the guy. Because nobody else was doing it. So it's kind of where we are now, man.
And you are a crazy executor, right? Like we are in the same Telegram group. And you came in there and you just built I think you built the whole funnel. Like, I tried to read all the chat and I remember you built that whole like ads funnel within 1 or 2 weeks, didn't you?
Man, you know,
you went like hard. Like
I had to, man. Like I was getting out of the military in a few months and I didn't want to be that guy that just got out of his job and didn't have anything, like a lot of momentum building. I knew that when I left, I really wanted to go all in.
Yeah.
So I remember, funny with Jeremy, I watched a couple of his YouTube videos and they were like, book a call. And Leo, the sales rep, texted me. He was like, man, when can we? I was like, dude, just send me the link. I don't want a sales call. I just know I want to do this. Send me the link. I will pay right now. So I just put that money on the credit card. Didn't have a sales call. I was just like, dude, I just want in. And more than anything else, though, and this has been such a big theme in my life, is sometimes it's hard to believe that it's going to work when you haven't seen it work.
Yeah.
So part of Jeremy, I remember the first time we had a conversation, he was like...
He screamed at you?
He said, when are you going to start putting your balls on the table?
No, he didn't scream.
So he was like, dude, you're playing so small right now. So at that moment, immediately, like he allowed me to borrow his belief that it would work. And that's when I was like, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let's just see what happens. And boom, we put it in. And, you know, it hasn't been consistent. Like I've had bad months just like everybody else. I've had down months just like everybody else. And it's definitely been a journey, man. But up until this point, yeah, ads, but most importantly, the cold email, because like you and I were talking off of camera, the cost of acquisition is just so much lower when it comes to cold email, and especially with all of the updates and everything that's just going into Facebook, it's becoming increasingly expensive. So I'm really diving more deeply into cold email to acquire my clients and just doing that at a higher level now.
Yeah. And then still running some ads on the site or no?
Not right now. No, I've just like quadrupled. I'm sending more, like 5x more emails than I ever have before. And like for me, running ads, it just became so expensive. I was like, let me just quadruple down on what has proven to be very profitable.
Yeah.
And then when that stops getting as many calls as I need, then I'll turn back on ads. And that's the thing. I just had a recent conversation about this. Being in Jeremy's group, I kind of felt like pressured to run ads. Like, I have to run ads. Look at all these people. They're all doing all these things. And if I want to get to there, I have to run ads. Then I had a conversation and the person asked, he was like, well, are booking calls on your calendar difficult right now? I was like, no. And they asked, are you booking as many as you want? Yeah. So why do you need ads? I was like, that makes sense. So as long as I could fill the calendar and I could do it as profitably as possible, I'm going to continue to ride cold email. And I'm sure like at some point ads will definitely come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, for me, it's like a no-brainer. It cost me like $7,500 to run the whole operation when it comes to cold email right now. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really funny. Like the sexy thing is to run ads, especially I consider you to be in B2B, right? But B2B, you know, you can call them. There's no rules in the US, right? That you cannot cold call people if they have a business.
It's like certain rules, like past certain hours and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
but like
you
you can call everybody, you can email them, you can send them physical mail. It's like you can do whatever you want. Like you don't even need to run ads. You know, if you are looking for a guy who just broke up with his girlfriend of 7 years, like you can't find that guy in the phone book or like anywhere else on the internet. But we know, business owners, you can. Cool. So we went kind of through your progression in terms of like building your own business. How did you build out the network in terms of like getting people in your network that you could connect in terms of like podcast hosts and all that kind of stuff? But what was the process there?
Well, here's the thing. So really, I have like 2 offers, okay? And the reason why I bring that up is a lot of the times when people think of podcast, all they think are these big name, celebrity level podcasts. But personally, where I've seen people get the most success is going after these hyper specific, hyper targeted podcasts that don't have millions of Instagram followers, YouTube subscribers, but they have a really dialed in message to a really dialed in audience. So it's a very hyper targeted approach where they're primarily on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and there's thousands, tens of thousands of people there. So when I first started to do it, the way that we ultimately built the relationships was twofold. Number one, we also did get like Tanner on some like smaller level podcasts as well, just to like kind of get some reps in. And I also got some other big name clients that paid me that didn't really want to spend hundreds of thousands, multiple 5 figures on podcasts. They were like, hey, I just want to go on these podcasts because I want to be out there. I want my SEO to improve. I want these chat GPT algorithms and all these LLMs to pick up on these podcasts and send them to people, et cetera. So what ended up happening was these podcast hosts were like, who else do you have for me? So now I just started to develop these relationships on the back of the more influential clients that I had. So whenever I got a new client, I was able to go to say, hey, I got Robin. He's a great guest. Now they trust me that anybody that I'm going to send to them is going to be just as good, if not more qualified than the last person I sent them.
Yeah.
So that was how I built that network, where a lot of the clients I work with, they want to get on niche specific podcasts.
You're talking like medical, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, medical, real estate investing. We've worked with clients that have done, I have one guy. He helps men from India come to America on a special K-1 visa in order to get their citizenship or something like that, right? I had to get him on 15 podcasts. It wasn't easy, but we ultimately did it, right? So that's like the one sect. But then there's like the other podcasts that people think of when they think podcast, like the big name podcasts, hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And the one thing is, I know what people want. They want to make more money. So how I thought about it was, well, what if I could help them make more money, but I also make more money? Now, what I mean by that is every podcast host, a lot of these hosts, what people don't know is it's a pay to play a lot of the time. 20 grand, 25 grand to come on my podcast. Now, here's the interesting thing. A lot of the times, you'll go work with somebody that can facilitate that. and they'll get you on those podcasts. But what they'll do is they'll keep the rate. They'll say, hey, the podcast is 20K. You become my client, I charge you the 20K, but now the podcast host gives me a kickback. I decided to flip that. And what I started to do was I said, listen, host, instead of you giving me a kickback, how about we just pass that discount on to my client? So now I started getting wholesale discounts on all of these podcasts. So now the reason why people would come to me is I can get you on those podcasts for a fraction of the price that anybody else could. So that's how I started to build that network and that relationship. Every podcast host wanted to make more money. I could send them more money and get my clients better results. So that's how I built like the two domains where they're equally as valuable. Those niche podcasts are gold because there's buyers in that audience. I had like one client, she helps perimenopausal women lose weight. A pretty big niche. There's a lot of actors in that space. She went on one show, she made 65 grand. One of the very first podcast she went on. Wasn't a big name show, but I had the relationship, right? So that's ultimately the thing is like, and this game is very relationship heavy, very relationship dependent. And the reason why is because, dude, they're getting so many pitches by 500 people a day. I've had hosts tell me that. I get 300 pitches a day. So that's how I went about building the relationships over time. And the beautiful part is there's always more relationships to be made, right? And that's like part of the good thing about my space is you actually like build value with other people, which I think is extremely valuable.
Yeah. Now, like, let's say you have a relationship with somebody and normally he charges 20K. If you come up with a really good guest who has like a big social media following or fits really well, or like, hey, I think this guy will probably go viral. Can you also like negotiate the rates and like get lower rates than like the baseline? Is that also something that's going on where there's some space there? Because that could also, make you a lot better provider than others.
Some host will be like, hey, if he has more than 250,000 followers and he's willing to promote me to his email list and his social following, he can come on for free.
Yeah.
So really, if you have like a big following, I would say like plus 250, plus 500, you could possibly get on there for free if you have an engaged audience. What I don't mean is if you just have like you went to one of these websites and you bought a bunch of followers, they're going to see that and they're going to say, oh no, you don't have any reach at all.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually paying for the podcast, that doesn't really matter. So that's where like the negotiation of making sure we can get the best rate possible is 100% the key. So it really depends on the host, man. I've seen some hosts, they don't give a crap who you are. You're paying to get on my show. I've seen people come and say, hey, listen, as long as they have over this amount, good to go. They don't have to pay my $20,000 fee.
Yeah.
Right. So that's part of like having a brand on social media is extremely important when it comes to these podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like, I DM people sometimes, and they see that I had other people on, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, sure," like crazy people, So it's interesting. All right, so like the first thing that I think right now, or like have thought about before with podcasts, like first of all, everybody's getting a podcast. Now people are paying for podcasts, and also the audiences are kind of starting to notice it a little bit. I don't know if you've seen that in the comments. They're like, "Hey, was this a paid podcast? Was this a promo?" So where do you see, in general, the podcast industry going? And how do you think that will change, for example, the pay-to-play landscape, right? Because also, if you're a podcast host and you invite a guest who's like super boring, even if they pay you 25, 50K, and your views tank, that's not good for the next podcast, right? Or like, if you then don't have a really great guest the next time who kind of balances it, that's tricky with the algorithm, right? And also, even like, I've seen this, I'm not going to call any names, but like I've seen where people are like, hey, why are you inviting this scammer on your podcast, right? And then it's like a pay to play, it's a scammer, and they don't get them too many views, or like they get unsubscribes a lot. How do you see this develop? Where do you see this go?
Yeah, so first thing is what a lot of people don't understand is there's a statistic out there. I saw it about 6 months ago, and I was like, wow. It said that 70% of people prefer to watch podcasts, but only 20% of podcasts have a video component. Mm-hmm. So what that tells me, number one, is video podcasts are going to be way on the rise. Yeah. More particularly in-person podcasts like this.
Yeah.
Now, that ties into the pay-to-play, because in order for us to get the studio, we have to rent it out, et cetera. There's production costs. We got to get fancy editors to do the whole... It's a whole ordeal in order to produce a podcast at this level, which I don't think a lot of people realize, right? It's a pretty big deal in order to do that.
Yeah.
But the caveat comes when there's podcasts out there that I do not send clients to, for the exact reason that you just mentioned. They will take anybody under the sun as long as they'll give them money. I actually had an experience recently with a podcast host that I really enjoyed. The podcast is called Words of Wisdom. I think Bern was on there.
Yeah.
And he said something to me. He says, send me his financial information. Send me his tax returns. I said, man, like you're the first guy that has ever asked me to send some type of credentialized information for a guest.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be two things that are going to happen. Number one, the podcasts that accept anybody. And when I say anybody, there's kind of two ways that we can help filter this out. Number one, if your prices are really high, immediately that's going to filter out the people that aren't really serious. The big business owners that really are doing things, that really like are movers and shakers, they're the only ones that are going to be able to afford that. So I think podcast rates are going to continue to increase, and I think that's going to help a bunch of podcasts from filtering out low-level guests. When I say low level, what I want to make very clear is what I mean when I say low level is simply experience in terms of business, not like person or anything like that. They're just at a lower level business-wise. We've all been there. I'm still at a low level. So now that's going to immediately increase the caliber of guests that they have. The problem is, though, is that there's all of these podcasts that charge $5,000, $7,500, and you can average, a business owner could afford that. They could throw that on an Amex. And what's going to happen to those podcasts is they're going to tank, definitely, because they allow anybody onto their podcast. There's some of these shows out there, man. They claim to be a business channel, and you go on their podcast and you look at what some of their podcasts have been about. They'll have a geologist. Next one, they'll have a porn star. Next one, they'll have a sales trainer. Next one, they'll have, and it's like, what are we doing here? So I think people are definitely catching on to it. And the thing is people don't do their research, and they will pay $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to go on these podcasts because they have millions of followers. Have you taken the time to look at the followers? Have you taken the time to look at the subscribers, the comment section? Because if you did, what you will clearly see is that a lot of them have either, number one, fake, extremely botted subscribers, comments, etc., or number two, they don't have any engagement. But, I thought he was a big name person. You go on the podcast, you get no traction. So on a consumer end, as somebody that's paying for a podcast, you really need to do your due diligence. You need to ask those questions. Specifically, you need to ask them this. Send me your YouTube analytics. Show me what your YouTube studio looks like. Show me a screenshot of your podcast platform downloads on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because that's not public information. But people will go online and they'll spew information like, I have a top 1% podcast in the world. That comes from a website, listennotes.com. I asked the founder of Listen Notes, I said, what does it mean if somebody's in the top 2%, 1%? What does that data come from? That is proprietary information. I am not allowed to share that with you. So these podcast hosts, and I see it, the robbery in this is those niche podcasts. They'll charge $1,000, $397. And I'll ask them to send information, and they'll say, I'm top 5%. When my podcast was top 5%, I was getting about 100 downloads a month. 100 downloads a month. So what's happening is, man, it's a robbery. And if you're not careful, you will end up paying for a podcast that get you absolutely nothing in return. Matter of fact, it will end up hurting your brand.
That's great. It's kind of like Instagram back in the day where you're like buying shout outs, but then there was like a page with only Indian followers. And
it's like a wild, wild west.
Yeah. Are you also looking at that, demographics and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we're very big on, especially like if somebody has a more of like a B2B offer, you got to target a very B2B sophisticated audience, right? So if someone's helping, a lot of financial advisors will work with us as an example, right? The people that are going to be into that, it's going to be one certain demographic of people. So whenever we work with a podcast, we make sure to get all of the demographics, but also like as best we can, because not all of the data is always available, like psychographics as well. Like how do these people think? How do they operate? Give us past experiences. Show us who's been successful. So that's really big. There's always three things I tell people when it comes to getting on a podcast. First thing is audience alignment. Making sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that the audience that podcast has is someone that you would want to get in front of. The best way to figure that out is look at who the person is. Now, if somebody like Andrew Huberman, he's going to attract a very sophisticated, scientific type of audience that is very serious. You look at someone like Chris Williamson, he's going to attract a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, people that are into optimization and stuff like that. So you really need to think for yourself, like, okay, who would listen to this? And if you're a business owner and you want to attract more business owners, think to yourself, would I listen to this? So that's the first thing, audience alignment. And if you're going to pay for it, you better damn well ask the host, who's your audience? Okay. Second thing is topic relevance. Take a look at the podcast and say, do they actually talk about topics that I talk about or something similar to that? Because if they don't, then the chances that the audience is going to be interested is low. But here's the thing that a lot of people do not understand. The last point is so important. Host alignment. Do your research on the host. Are you going to actually have a good conversation? Are your personalities going to clash and it's just going to be a terrible conversation? Because now I pay 10 grand, I go on a podcast, the guy treats me like crap. Now I'm out of 10 grand. He fulfilled his promise. He had me on his podcast. Now I'm not going to get any traction. And it was because you, as the podcast guest, didn't do your due diligence to make sure that you were aligned with that host. So there's a lot of homework that somebody has to do, but those are the 3 key things that I always tell people. Make sure that the audience is aligned, the topics are aligned, and the hosts are aligned. When you have all 3 of those in place, you can go on a podcast that has 1,000 views, get substantially better views than somebody that goes on a podcast that has 100,000 views, but they didn't hit those 3 key metrics.
Yeah, that's actually the follow-up question on that. Something that I don't see happen a lot, which I think is an opportunity, because I have my own podcast, I think about that. I think that most people that have like a more generic podcast, Chris Williamson, Bradley, they talk about a lot of stuff. It's still business. I mean, it's everything. It's relationship, business, right? Like, I feel like what they do really well and a lot of others don't is that they don't think about, hey, okay, how can I, trick my audience into listening to this subject matter expert, right? Because let's say it's about trading, or let's say it's about eating whatever stuff to, be more productive. Like, if you don't frame it the proper way in the thumbnail, the description, and then the intro, then your viewers will still not listen. And I feel like that's like something that most podcast hosts don't really do yet. Or am I missing something? Or do you also think that's like something that will be more improved?
You're 100% right. But I don't think it's the podcast host's responsibility. Now, for the podcast host, if they want to maximize views, etc., of course, that's going to be their responsibility.
Yeah.
But what I mean when I say I don't think it's their responsibility is the problem is when a guest goes on a podcast, they don't understand that. The audience is so broad. The question that a podcast listener or viewer is thinking, 3 things. Who are you? What do you have for me? Why should I care? Who are you? What do you have for me? Why should I care? Well, what most people do when they go on a podcast, they'll just blabber on. Blabber, blabber, this is my story, etc.
Yeah.
So as opposed to the host really having a proper introduction, which at the higher level, they typically tend to have some sort of structure, you as the guest need to have a structure for how you introduce yourself on the podcast. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. Although I still think if you look at the most successful podcast intros, that they use snippets before there's even an intro.
Yep.
Right. And then it's like, whose responsibility is it to be like, okay, you said like, why should they care? Right. I think it's even deeper than that. Like, why should they care? And why should they care about like specifically what makes this podcast, this subject matter expert unique, right? Because, they might have seen multiple traders, they have seen multiple health experts. How many fitness coaches do we have nowadays who teach other fitness coaches how to become a successful fitness coach, right? So I'm curious what you think about it. I feel like for me, that's also the hardest part. Like, how do you figure out how to frame this properly in a unique way?
Yeah,
from
like the host
sides.
Perspective.
I mean, I guess it's on both sides. I'm just asking you how you think this will evolve and what the best practices are.
Yeah, I definitely think that what you mentioned in terms of, we see it all the time. Like starting the podcast with snippets from the actual show that are either most controversial, that are funny, or that seem like they're about to lead into a big talking point. It'll be like, and the first tip is cut to the episode, right? So the host, and that's the thing, when you're going to get on a podcast, make sure that stuff is optimized. Because if you're going to pay, you need to make sure that you're going on a podcast that's going to put you in the best position to get the biggest result possible. So the host, absolutely, they need to do that. Because if they don't, what's happening is there's so many podcasts that are coming out. So now if you don't have that, they're not going to even tune into your podcast because somebody else that does is just more interesting.
Yeah.
So it's huge from like an audience retention perspective from the podcast host side. Now the podcast guest, this is what people don't understand. The audience is thinking to themselves, is this podcast going to be relevant for my life? Is this going to be relevant for my situation? So what a guest needs to do is typically, I'd say 75 to 80% of podcast hosts are usually going to open up with some type of question like, give the audience some context, tell us who you are, like that type of thing, right? Which is something that you don't do, which I actually admire. But the reality is, dude, that's like 99%.
Yeah, and then you need to be prepared, of course,
right?
for that
And
question.
then you need to be prepared.
Yeah.
So in that case, like you need to do a couple of different things. You need to state who you are. You need to state the challenge that you help your ideal client overcome. You need to state your goal of how you help them overcome that. Number 4, from that point, you're going to need to identify, okay, what is that next story that I want to lead into?
Yeah.
So like earlier, just as like an example, one of the things that I did, I didn't even do it like consciously, but now that I'm thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, that one Russell Brunson story, that was one that like really changed things. And then the next question you asked me was, well, tell me about that story.
Yeah.
And then that's how you begin to, as a podcast guest, strategically guide that conversation. Because what happens is a lot of guests, unfortunately, they just like let the host talk about it, whatever they want or whatever. And this, I don't see this all of the time, but a lot of the times they don't know how to strategically guide that conversation. Like it is an art. It is a science to guide the conversation in a way where you add value, but also you're taking the conversation where you want to.
Yeah, and that's hard. I have people on there who I cannot do that with.
Oh yeah,
because they are crazy. But
yeah, it's definitely tough. Like, and also from like a host perspective, last thing you want is somebody come on your podcast and just gatekeeping information or trying to sell their stuff the whole time. And you know, a podcast is great when there's 2 things: when the host wants to add value to you as the guest and the audience, and then also you as the guest want to add value to the host and to the audience. So one of the things that I always tell my clients is you need to think about this like you're sitting at a table and there's 3 chairs. You, the host, but more importantly, the audience. Because what people don't understand is the audience is there and is this relevant for me? Is this going to be something that's going to help me get to where I want to go, overcome my challenges? So with that being said, we need to understand that the host is the facilitator for me getting my message to the audience. So what I always tell clients to start with is we have a framework. We call it acknowledge and encourage. As soon as the host welcomes you on, you're going to say, dude, I just want to acknowledge you for the work you've done. It's like, I know the work that goes into having a podcast, and I don't think people really realize that. And wherever you're tuning in, just go ahead and leave a 5-star rating and review, because it's really going to help Robin spread that message to more people. I had a client do that on a podcast. It's in the top 0.1%, right? Whatever that means. Millions of downloads a month. The podcast host said to him, I just want you to know, in 10 years, I've never had one person do that for me. So guess what happens when he did that? The host let him steer that conversation wherever he wanted. Now it's his conversation. How's that going to help the buying process?
Yeah.
Now he gets to plant all of the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that he needs his prospects to have. He can plant them because now he's controlling that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Now, circling back a little bit to what you just mentioned, like the audio part of a podcast, overrated or underrated?
Totally underrated. Totally underrated, for sure. That's where the biggest audience is still for 99% of podcasts. Even the podcasts that we see that are these bigger name podcasts, these more mainstream podcasts, they're getting quadruple, 10x the amount of listeners as they are viewers on their podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I had a conversation with a podcast that's in Las Vegas, big name podcast. They got about 400,000 subscribers. They get about maybe 10,000 views per episode. They get 10x that on audio. But people that are very, I'm not going to say status driven, but they just want, and I'm status driven. We're all status driven to a certain extent. People that care about vanity metrics too much, they'll look at a podcast and say, they don't have enough YouTube subscribers. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the biggest challenges, quite frankly, with some of the clients that I work with, is making sure they have that expectation up front of, you need to prioritize these audio-based platforms because that is still where the audience is. Fast forward 5 years from now, I don't think it'll be that way. But currently at this moment, that's where the audience is still, it's where they still are. So completely underrated.
It seems also like it's going to be more of like a hybrid, where it's like you have YouTube, music where you can listen to it. You can also toggle on video, toggle off video.
Yeah, just look at like Spotify.
Yeah, and Spotify is doing that nowadays.
Yeah, now they got the video podcast on there, and that's why going back to the point earlier. Yeah, video podcasts are just they're becoming so much more of a hot commodity, you know. But then from a podcast host perspective, how do you differentiate yourself, right? Like I always hear like everybody got a podcast now, everybody, and I think it's genuinely by the quality of the questions you ask, and that's one of the things that I think separates you is like you don't open with that generic question, you dive right in and you give people value. So yeah, it's a changing landscape and it changes really, really, really fast. But the interesting thing is like if you stick to it from a host perspective, there's 4 million plus podcasts, but like I think there's statistics like very rarely does someone get past episode 10.
Yeah. I celebrated that when I was like, yeah, I'm at beat 95%.
I'm in the 1%, right? Really hard to accomplish. So yes, as long as you stay consistent, and then from a business owner guest perspective, especially in the market we live in now, what I always tell people is do not come into this with the expectation that you're going to make a bunch of money in the next 90 days. Because you're not. You got to go on the podcast and you got to shoot it. You got to edit it. You got to go in the queue. Then they publish it. Right? So it's a long-term game.
Yeah,
but even
100%.
if you look at like someone like an Alex Hermosi, the first thing he started doing when he built his personal brand, he went on other people's podcasts, took that content, strategically deployed it, and he created a content ecosystem. So for somebody that's really looking to like really build their brand, but what I also tell people is they have a narrow view on what it will do for their business. By you going on podcasts, it's the ultimate thing that you can do potentially. One of the things that you can do, drive down your ad cost. Because now people see you on podcasts, now they see you on their feeds. Now there's a familiarity bias. Your click-through rate's going to go up probably, right? If your sales team knows how to deploy your podcast and the content from that podcast, it's going to increase your close rate. If you know how to deploy it in the window between when somebody books a call and shows a call, it's going to increase your show rate. So that's where I really like to focus is like beyond just the exposure piece of it, but how does it really impact all of sales and marketing, which I think is something that a lot of people don't really look at. They just look at it from like an exposure perspective.
Yeah, got it. So going back to the audio podcast, like if you're an absolute nobody, how do you grow your audio part of the podcast? Or is that just something that happens if you have a big brand or?
Yeah, twofold, man. Really, I wish there was a more sexy answer to it. Consistency.
Yeah.
So there's just been some podcasts over there, like my podcast. The first year, I didn't get nobody to listen to it.
Yeah.
But now, when I got 100 episodes in, now I started to get some well-known people. Then this guy wanted to come on, that guy wanted to come on. So unfortunately, like you're just gonna have to suck. One of my favorite quotes is you have to be bad long enough in order to become good. And that's just the case when it comes to that. Or number two, if you want to run ads to your podcast, that's something that could work. I'm not super experienced in that, but I've seen
Spotify ads and Apple podcast ads?
Yeah, I'm specifically on YouTube. Like you could run ads to a YouTube channel and just like pump subscribers on there or try to get subscribers on there. Or one of the things you could do is you can run meta ads to like a clip of a podcast of you talking on your podcast, that driving people to an Apple podcast or a Spotify or to your profile, and then around there trying to grow it. It's definitely like not the most effective way. But one of the really effective ways is people don't do is they don't leverage their DMs. That's a great way to get people to go listen to your podcast is, hey, thought this would be great value to you. Go ahead, boom. But like, don't spam people with it. But like, if it's something that will actually genuinely add value to people, if you send that to people, send them the Spotify link or the Apple podcast link, you'll be surprised. Like that's one of the ways that I started to grow my podcast.
Initial momentum.
Yeah. But more importantly, what I used to do is once these people would get value, I would ask them, hey, would you mind leaving me a 5-star rating and review? That really doesn't do anything for the algorithm. But now when I go to a bigger name guest and I say, hey, I have 250 5-star reviews, they're like, oh, okay, this guy must be legit. Versus somebody that has 20 reviews.
Yeah.
They're not going to take it seriously. So consistency, but also if you do have a brand, yes, you can just blow up, quote unquote, overnight. But once again, man, it's really unfortunate because there used to be a site called Chartable. And what Chartable would do, and you can actually still find this data on Apple Podcasts. You go to Apple Podcasts and you type in, let's just say as an example, top entrepreneurship shows. And you'll see podcasts on there that have like 2 ratings. And you'll think to yourself, I never heard of this. And you go look it up and it has like 3 episodes. How'd this get here? I'll tell you how it got there. There's companies out there where you go on their website and what they'll do is you'll sign up and they'll be like overseas. I don't know how it works exactly. People overseas, you'll pay like $1,000 and it'll just pump download. But it's all BS. It's all fake.
Yeah.
And then guess what those people will turn around and do? My podcast is in the top 10. $1,000.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah, that's one of those hard things with podcast, YouTube, everything. It's like the quality of your audience. Like, you know, you want to like, for example, I really want to hit that 10K YouTube subs because I'm like, okay, at least now people feel like, okay, if I go on there, I can get lucky. I can get a bunch of views on. He has like a little audience. But then the question is always like, what's the quality of that audience? Like if you do that, like that's why I would never do that like in India or whatever and like let them download it, because then the algorithm would just show it to those people. And that for me, because I want high quality viewers, that doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, if you're smart and you blow up your YouTube channel to 1 million subs and it's all Indians, I mean, to be fair, like maybe you could do that for like 10, 20K and then you have like 1 million YouTube subs. And I mean, that might also work.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. Like take Jeremy Haynes as an example. He has 20,000 subscribers now.
Yeah.
He's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because he's getting in front of the right subscribers.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, from a guest perspective, do not undervalue a very niched podcast that might only have 2,000 downloads per episode.
Yeah.
Because it's the right people, right? And then from, like you said, from a host perspective, don't be that guy that's just completely lacking integrity just to make a few bucks. That's a terrible way to act in this space. And unfortunately, that's why trust in the whole market is at an all-time low, because everybody's doing that just to make another dollar.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like for me, it's logical what you're just saying. Like it's logic that the smaller podcasts that only talk about specific subjects, that makes sense to go on those podcasts if you're like in a similar like niche audience industry.
But think about it for a second. Imagine somebody that has, let's take me. I have like 9,000, 10,000 Instagram followers. If I really want to grow my brand, if I really want to grow, I'm going to think, I need to get on these big name podcasts and I need to get in front of their audience and all. So what society does is it brainwashes us to believe that vanity metrics equals growth.
Yeah.
But what real business owners understand is that it's better to get in front of the right people than to just get in front of people. And I always tell people on my sales calls, people will be like, I just want more leads. And I'm like, well, let me ask you this. If they were all broke and they couldn't pay you what you're worth, you still want them? So what I always say is we need to get in front of the right people. When I say that, I mean two things. Number one, these are people that are already having the problem that you're looking to solve, right? They're in the market, they're problem aware, preferably they're solution aware as well. But also number two, they have the financial capability and willingness to pay you what you're worth. And that's why somebody like a Jeremy has done so well. It's because everybody that's tuning in, they have the problem that he solves, and a lot of them have the money to pay him what he's worth.
Yeah, 100%. But for me, that's still quite logic. I mean, I also understand the logic of somebody who wants to go on a big podcast, right? And I honestly still think it's a good idea. I've done that in the Netherlands.
It is a good idea.
The only problem is if you have a really niche message and you go on a mass market podcast, you have to be a freaking genius with the intro, with the hook, with the thumbnail, right? Because already like most people don't want to watch it. So if your thumbnail sucks, like 2 people click on it, YouTube is like, okay, you're done. And you get 0 views. So I think that's what I like about cold traffic and mass markets. I think that's the most interesting science. Like, how do you go mass market, even if you have a little bit of a sub niche or like a niche subject? But that's hard, man.
That's why I said earlier, like that woman who helped perimenopausal women lose weight, right? She actually does run ads she's doing a couple $100,000 a month in her business. She runs ads, they crush. Mm-hmm. But she started going on these podcasts. And she went on podcasts that specifically talk about how do I lose weight as a perimenopausal woman.
Yeah.
Every single person that tunes into that podcast is somebody that is a perimenopausal woman that wants to lose weight.
That's like the first step. It makes sense to
exactly.
Just go there. Yeah.
So what I always tell people is you want to look 2 ways, direct and indirect. A direct podcast for her is a podcast exactly that talks about perimenopausal weight loss for women. Okay?
Yeah.
An indirect podcast would be something that's adjacent to that, but also has the audience of her. So let's take like a real estate investor. I'll get them on real estate investing podcast, but then I'll also get them on like an entrepreneurship podcast. Because entrepreneurs have the end desire or have the end goal that he helps people attain, which is to build more wealth ultimately.
Yeah.
So don't get like so blinded and I just need to go on this one type of podcast, this one. Instead of thinking about it like that, think about where is my audience spending their time that I'm not currently thinking about.
Yeah, and I guess it's also being realistic, right? Because it's like if you go on a mass market podcast, it's almost like you need to produce a movie trailer to make it work in a big scale, right? It's like if you are Hermosi and you talk about really specific subjects, it's like you just say like, hey, this is how I solve problem X for this person in this niche, and that works. But if you're like talking about, you know, women who want to lose weight in their menopause, then it's a podcast for women, right? Then if you can hook in everybody who's like 10 years before, 10 years after, during it, and even the husbands, right?
Yeah.
How they can help them, then boom, like you can get a bunch of views, you can get a bunch of...
and that's the thing, like, honestly, man, a lot of people have unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, like, I mean, you need to be a freaking genius. That's like, you are like a movie producer of the trailer of like the podcast setup to make that work.
100%. That's why you need to be dialed in, right? So with part of that, though, I think the other thing is understanding. I was watching a video recently, awesome interview. I definitely recommend people watching it. Daniel Priestley, okay, he's really, really big name in the business world. He said before he ever got on any of these big podcasts, Diary of a CEO, blah, 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 he said he went on a few hundred small podcasts.
Yeah.
And he said part of the reason is twofold. Number one, you got to work your way up.
Yeah.
Now you can pay but I want to make very clear, you can't pay for all the shows. Like there's only, I'd say less than half shows that you can actually pay on. Now you go to them, you say, hey, here's $1 million. They're probably going to take you on a show, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's not really a business model for them. So number one, going on smaller shows when you're first getting started, it's going to help you get more reps under your belt. You're going to start to see the frequently asked questions that people, you can build a system around it versus paying 10 grand for a podcast, not having done any, and thinking you're God's gift to green earth. Now you go on the show, you blow it because you don't have any reps, right? It's like trying to go to the MLB the first day you start swinging a baseball bat. It's not going to work that way. But then also what you were saying earlier was you start getting better. And then what happens is now you start getting more views than most people get. And that's when that next tier of podcast host says, oh, wow, this person gets views. Let me pull him. Now you're in that next category. And now you stay there for a little bit. You start getting more views than everybody else. Then you go to the next category. So it's like it's a game where you have to be really patient. But on top of that, while you're doing that, now your SEO is like through the roof. Every time people look up your name, they're seeing that you've been on all of these podcasts, which is going to create instant trust and credibility to a certain level. It's like there's so much benefit in doing even the small ones and working your way up and just being patient. And then, yeah, go ahead and drop 20 grand on a podcast. But to do it right out of the gate, your first ever show, I wouldn't recommend it. And I'll tell you the reason why, because a lot of the clients I work with, they're doing over $1 million a month. They're like big players. And they think just because I speak on stage, I've built a big business, that I'm good on a podcast. Just like anything else, it's an acquired skill. Because like I said earlier, there's you, there's the host, and then there's the audience. And that's a skill that, you know, takes time to develop.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're interviewing experts, like I've seen it a lot. Like sometimes I know like the gold that they have in their brain, but you know, I'm trying. I
can't take it out for them.
I can't only take out 40 to 60%, and I'm like, man, you have so much more in it. But that's also me. I'm not blaming anybody. But yeah, that's interesting to hear how you also recommend like them working their way up.
Yeah, and I'm not saying do hundreds of them. I want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
But start small. You know, let's review some of your podcasts. How did you do? Did you introduce yourself properly? Did you craft your call to action properly? Did you tell your stories properly? Because all of these things people don't understand. Like, it's an audio-based experience. You need to make it enjoyable. How's your tonality? Are you enjoyable to listen to? Do you speak like this the whole time? Because it's not just what you say, it's how you say what you say.
Yeah.
And this is the biggest misconception. People think, I just need to go on podcasts. No, you don't. You need to get people to watch from beginning to end. Because if somebody clicks on your podcast for 10 seconds, was it really worth it? No. It's only worth it if somebody listens, maybe not even from beginning to end, but you maximize retention, because that's the thing that's going to build trust.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And to go back to your original statement regarding views, it's like also, even if you're not specialized, right? Like if, let's say you teach people how to, become traders or drop shipping, or you teach people how to lose weight, like even if you get a couple of thousand views and a couple % of those people look you up, send you a DM, if you sell something for a couple of thousand, like you can still, like with like a couple of thousand views, make an easy 10K. So that also stacks up, especially when you're not making 100K plus, then those podcasts are totally worth it.
And if I may, I would love to give like your audience a really, my number one tip when it comes to this: make sure you send people to a place where you control the conversation. What I mean by that is a lot of the times what I see people doing is sending people to a landing page or something like that.
Yeah.
You lose people in that process. So a lot of the times what I would love to do with clients is like, okay, let's set up a funnel that's going to drive somebody to an Instagram DM. Now, first thing I'm going to do is what? Hey, what's your email? Now I capture their email. Automatically goes into my CRM.
Yeah.
Now, the most important thing, I'm in a one-to-one conversation with a raging hot lead. But if they went to my website or my landing page, they didn't download my lead magnet. Now I lose them forever. But now if they come to me, now I could follow up. Now I can XYZ. So make them come to you in a place where you can have a conversation that you can control rather than sending them to a platform that you can't really optimize control. Even if you have setters, sure, you can have the setters call the people that opt in. What about all the people that you lost in the process? In the meantime, if you send them to a social media channel, now you're also building your following, right? So there's multiple benefits to that. And that's really what I would recommend is this doesn't work for everybody. Like there's certain people that I would set up a landing page for or something like that, or maybe like a direct email funnel if it's particularly an older crowd or very, very B2B or LinkedIn. So it's very context dependent. But like I hear it all of the time. Go to my landing page and just get my free gift. You sound like everybody else. So the biggest thing people need to understand is crafting an offer. This is the thing I tell people. It has to be exclusive to the podcast so that people cannot get it anywhere else. They can't go on Instagram and find it. They can't go to your website and find it. It needs to be something that creates urgency to do it now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hardest, most effort way to do it. So second thing would be to create context where you mention, let's say you talk about a certain subject and then at the end of the video, and if you want to dive deeper into subject X, Y, Z, click the link below. I record a video about that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's how you frame it too.
Yeah.
So it's like, it would be something like, and for everybody that's listening, I've done something special because I genuinely value Robin as a podcast host and the value you deliver. So I wanted to over deliver as well. And what I put together is specifically for this type of person. Describe who it's for. Call it out clearly, right? And this is something my clients are probably going to get mad at me for giving away because I typically only give it to them, but I'm going to give it to you absolutely for free. It's down in the description.
Yeah.
So you went from, I put together a training, it's down in the description, to something that's exclusive, it's urgent, you could only get here, and here's who it's for. And when you have those pieces to the puzzle, that's when people really start to take action.
Yeah. Gotcha. Before we dive into your story, which we're also always going to do at the end of the podcast, I want to ask you one more question. What's the best way to reach out to other podcast hosts to get yourself on a podcast if you want to skip the line?
Yeah, first thing is you need to understand that a podcast host really cares about themselves. So a lot of podcast guests try to make everything about me. Here's why I want to come on your podcast. Here's why I want to come on your podcast.
Yeah.
But as the podcast guest, when you're reaching out to a podcast host, you need to clearly articulate that you are there to solve a problem or specifically to serve their audience in a very particular way. Okay, so that's the first thing, is having that mindset that you need to shift from, I want to come on your podcast. I've done all of these things. Here's all of my credentials. Sure, all of that's important, but what the first thing is making sure that you're going into that engagement with, I'm going to articulate how I am going to add value to your particular audience. Okay, second thing is absolutely do not write a long email. A lot of people write me books. Okay, I have my own podcast. I get pages. I never accept any of them. Number one, because they don't feel relevant and I don't see how this person's going to help my audience solve a problem. But number two, is just so long. Okay. Number three is you need to write a really compelling hook. So what I like to do, I like to start with this. Number one, you compliment them on their show. Hey, Robin, really love your podcast. I saw the episode that you did with Deven, really struck a chord. I love when he talked about podcasts, or I love when he talked about how to write a podcast pitch. Now, okay, well, this dude actually looks at my stuff versus everybody else. Hey, Deven. Hey, Robin. Love the podcast. It's like, dude, I know that you didn't watch it. I know you're just reaching out. Right? So with that being said, second step then is, I always say this, start with who you are and your journey. My name is Deven Rodriguez. I'm the founder of podcastguest.io. I went from X to Z. I went from being an active duty Army officer with negative $231 in my pocket to building a multi-seven-figure company in under 2 years by the age of 27. Oh, wow. That sounds pretty cool. So now that I say that also establishes credibility, but it also makes me interesting. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. A lot of people want to go on these big podcasts, but they're not framing themselves as being interesting enough. But people subconsciously, they think in images. So when I say I went from this to this, immediately they start thinking in their heads, what's the picture of that look like? And it opens a loop. Now they want to close that loop by bringing you on the podcast. So once you do that, then you're going to go to the next section, is talking about what you want to come on the podcast to do. Robin, I don't want to come on the podcast and talk about all things getting on podcast. I would just love to share my journey and all of the strategies and tactics that I learned about how to scale a business to 7 figures in under 18 months. Okay. Now, here's the next section. And by the way, the reason why I did that is because what does a podcast host, let's say in business and entrepreneurship, what does he really care about? Does he really care about getting booked on podcast? His audience, there might not be that many people that are on there that are wondering that. But what they are wondering is, damn, this dude went from 0 to 7 figures in 18 months. I want to know about that. So I have to frame what I want to go on that podcast as being broad. But when I get on the show, inevitably what I do is going to come up, right? But I'm trying to get my foot in the door. Next section is you want to suggest content. Here's some topics that I specifically want to talk about. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Try to fit them all on one line inside of Gmail or wherever you're sending your emails from. First point I usually like to be about how I went from blank to blank, how I went from Army officer to building a 7-figure business. Another point that I like to talk about, you actually asked the question, trends. Most common trends I see about XYZ and where I see it going. And then the other ones are going to be very context dependent upon like who you are and your experience of what you've done. But a key point is I always like to phrase them in how-to format. How to blank. How to blank, besides the story one. Well, actually, that starts with how as well. So I always like to put them in a how-to format because now you're like giving them the question to ask you.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's very simple. Once you give them the content, what you want to do is you want to say, okay, I'm also an open book to talk about anything else that you feel like would serve your audience. And this is particularly important if you have a big following or a decent sized following. I'd say anything like if you have an email list or over 10,000 followers is where it really matters. And of course, I'm going to promote your episode to my email list of 250,000 subscribers and my Instagram following of 15,000. Now the podcast host starts thinking, oh, that's what I could get out of this. Yeah. And then a very direct, clear call to action. If you feel like we're a good fit, let me know next steps. Instead of something that's very ambiguous. Now, last thing I'll say on that, follow up. Very few of the bookings that we've gotten for our clients in the past, now we have a lot of relationships, but like when we were first getting started, we would have to follow up and we would get a lot of bookings on the second follow-up. So a lot of people don't do that, right? And there's other things, of course, like make sure your Instagram looks good, right? Like have a good bio, be an interesting person.
I mean, that's hard. You cannot fix that, like that. You gave them an email template that they could literally they could transcribe this, send it to their VA, send it out. But you cannot be an interesting person.
Well, no, when I say interesting, though, I mean, like, look interesting, right? Start putting stuff, like, be conscious about what you're posting on social media. I'm not saying go out there and, like, be braggadocious and, like, have a fancy, crazy setup, but have a presence so that when people see you, they're like, oh, okay. Because you know what a host is going to do? They're going to go and you're going to look you up on Instagram. And if you don't have anything on Instagram, it makes you a lot less attractive. So when I say interesting, I mean have content out there that people could consume. Because if not, they're not going to know that you're interesting. And when somebody doesn't know that you're interesting, they're not even going to entertain the conversation.
Yeah. Now, what would you adjust if it would be to get somebody on your own podcast, right? So now we're like, hey, this is how you become a guest. So I guess like if you change that to, I would love to have you on my show, you would mention because I would love to pick your brain on this or this or this or talk about this or ask you this. That's one of the things. Is there anything else you would change?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would do is, and I do this, one of the things that because everybody wants bigger name guests on their podcast. It's going to help them grow. But what you need to understand is that they're getting pitched from 100 people a day.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is similar to the other way around. What most hosts do is they make it all about them. Would love for you to come on my show. Would love for you to talk about this. Would love for you to talk about that. But the person that's a guest, when you're getting flooded with pitches all day, what you're thinking to yourself subconsciously is who's gonna help me get the most out of this?
Yeah.
So what you want to do is during your pitch, you want to articulate the success that previous guests have had. So what I write in my pitches is we also really love to promote our podcast guest episodes. And we've had multiple clients that have generated multiple 5 figures from the podcast. So immediately they're like, oh, wow. So we would love to promote and also specifically, we would love to promote any specific lead magnet offer. We're really big on that. So we would love to help you push this out to as many people as possible because we're also passionate about your mission. So now I say, you come on my podcast, I'm going to help you get results. And here's other people that have gotten results. Immediately, if I'm a business owner, that makes it more attractive than somebody else that's saying, come on my podcast, would love to have you talk to my audience. Now the guy knows, oh yeah, I'm probably going to get something out of this. He's going to help me push this hard. He's going to let me pitch. Now, this is also where the art of being a host comes into play, right? Is being able to control that conversation. See how it's like control the conversation of the guest, control the conversation of the host. It's like it's a duality between the two. But now you get somebody on your show, you also need to control to make sure that they're not like being too pitchy and stuff like that, right? So it's a delicate balance between leading with, I'm going to let you promote your products and services versus being skilled enough at asking questions to make sure that they're actually delivering value to your audience. And of course, there is a place on a podcast, in my opinion, for allowing somebody to show people what that next step is and to tell them what that next step is. But I think we could both agree there's nothing worse than that guy or that girl, that woman. It's just a pitch fest, right? I hate that, man. So yeah, that's the key to getting big name guests. Like I had like huge people on my podcast when I had no following. And the way that I did it, I just framed everything in their best interest. Also mention the past guests you've had on. If you've had on players in the space, immediately by association, once again, they're going to trust you more and they're going to say, oh, it's credible. Must be something worth listening to.
And with this, you're also using email most of the time? Or both?
Okay, good question. So email works, but what works arguably even better, I say arguably because I think it's gotten a little bit harder over time because now with Instagram, like sending DMs to just straight request folder and video pitches. Video pitches also tend to work very well. Make sure you have a blue check mark so it at least increases your chances of landing in primary. And what you would do is you want to keep it really short and sweet. You know, hey Deven, really big fan of your show. Saw the episode you did with John. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Listen, man, I would love to come on and talk about my journey from X to Z. Have a lot of value that I can add. Specifically think I could talk about these things. Boom, 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 boom. Let me know what you think. If you think it's a fit, great. If not, just let me know, man. So I don't just sit here twirling my thumbs wondering if you're going to get back to me. Haha. Right? So make it like, that's a big thing. This is the one thing I always tell people, and you're a copy guy, so you get this. What I always tell people is when you're writing these pitches, when you're doing a selfie video and you're sitting there like this, ask yourself this. Would I actually say this to a friend? Would I say this to a friend? So that's how I write all my pitches. That's how I send all of the selfie videos. I do that a little bit less now because it's not as effective. Does this email sound like I would send it to a friend? The reason why, I'll tell you what, over time, guess who's popped up? More companies like mine, right? And what they do, oh my God, you've probably gotten them before. Hey, we would love for you to have on XYZ person. They would be a great fit. And it's so like, you could tell. I remember one time I got a pitch and they forgot to take out in brackets, insert name here. I was like, hey, just to let you know, you forgot to take out the insert name here in your template. So people are just so used to templatized BS where it's all about, would love to be on the podcast. We need to flip the switch. Ask yourself after you're done writing it, would I actually send this to a friend? Okay, boom, I would. It's framed in the best interest of the guest or the host. Now let's send that email.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I get a lot of people like, hey, I think I could help you improve your YouTube channel. I'm like, okay, tell me how. And another thing that I see is I get like messages from Germans because I had a German on the podcast and they think I'm German, but there's like nowhere does it say I'm German. But then I still get these copy-paste messages from all, and I read a little bit German. It's all the same messages from different people. I'm like, I'm not even speaking German. Like I used one word one time. So it's,
I mean, that's also the thing, right?
They don't put in the effort. Yeah,
that's the thing is as more automated tools come out, it makes it easier to do outreach at scale, but it also makes it easier to win.
Yeah.
Because if you could just, people want things so easily, but if you just put in a little bit of manual work into the process to differentiate yourself.
Or research,
or research, it makes it so much easier to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but he was like, yeah, it's easier than ever to succeed in marketing because everybody's just like using ChatGPT and not thinking for themselves anymore. And like the creativity is like an all-time low. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Cool. I mean, I think we went through your whole story. I think we still have some other stuff to talk about. I will quickly check the time. We are still good. So you started with storytelling. But we didn't talk about how you got into that because that's more like your hero journey, which we can also go into a little bit now. Now we got all the juice out. So for everybody, this is no marketing stuff anymore, but it's always interesting to see how that happened as well to inspire others. So what like, maybe we should take a little bit of a step back. Like, why did you get in the army? Well, what's the story there?
Yeah, so I grew up in Queens, New York. That's where I grew up my whole life, and middle class family. Great family. Mom, my biological dad wasn't in my life, but then I had my stepdad come into my life when I was really young. So he became my dad, and he was the one that really helped shape me and just mold me. And I grew up bullied for a long time. So
you're a big guy. You were not a big guy back in the day?
No, I was big. I was big, but I was really fat. Okay, I was really fat, and I was picked on a lot, and I was a young kid, like 2nd grade to like 8th grade, and that really does some stuff to like your self-esteem. I just felt terrible about myself. Anyways, went to high school rather, and I had a discussion with my dad one day. I don't know about you back in high school, but my full-time job back in high school was playing video games. Okay?
I was too poor for that. I didn't have a video game.
I was playing video games, man. And Call of Duty was my game of preference. And it was like 1:30 in the morning. I used to stay up until like 5 a.m. with my friends or whatever. The very limited friends I did have, which were also like the outcasts. And my dad called me out. He said, "Devin, get out here." I was like, "Dad, I'm playing Search and Destroy with my friends right now. Get out here." And he asked me a question. He said, "Sit down, I need to ask you something." He said, "What makes you different from anybody else who's ever achieved anything great in life?" I said, "Dad, please, save it. Come on, can I just go back to playing my game? Answer the question. What makes you any different from anyone who's ever achieved anything great?" "Dad, I don't know. I don't care." And I was in high school. So I said, "Everybody that's at the top of my class, they just naturally get it. They just understand it." He said, "Devin, I never want you to forget what I'm about to say. Anyone who's ever achieved anything great in life puts on their pants one leg at a time, just like you do. They put on their shirt one arm at a time, just like you do. So I ask you again, what makes you different?" And I said, "Dad, are you finally done here?" He said, "Yeah." But there's some things in life that, and I don't know if like anybody that's watching this, listening to this can resonate with it, but people will say something to you that like just plants a seed. And it just keeps coming back. I couldn't go to bed that night. And I woke up finally, like 12 o'clock the next afternoon, and that question was still there. What if he's right? What if I can achieve something great? What if I can become someone great? And I said, "You know what? I'm going to figure this out for myself. I'm going to find out if I can." So I said, "You know what? My next semester in school is coming up, fall semester. I'm going to apply myself for the first time, and I'm really going to see what I could do." I went from like number 65 to number 5 in my class in one semester. I was actually one of those guys that did good in school. I liked school. Okay, I liked it. Okay, watch it over there, right?
I'm not going to curse you out. I'm not going to curse you out. No worries.
So, but I share that because I was like, whoa, I am capable of so much more than I initially thought that I was.
Yeah.
So fast forward, the reason why I went to the military was because I originally wanted to go to a college. It's called the United States Naval Academy. It's a big military college in the US. It has like an 8% acceptance rate. Long story short, I did not do well on my SATs. I did not get into that school. So I went to a local college, St. John's. It's local, but it's not like a community college. It's a 4-year college, pretty big. And I joined ROTC, which is like where they train you to become an officer in the Army. So once you graduate, now you ship off into the Army. So my goal, because growing up in the family I did, was like success is you go to school, you go get a corporate job, you're successful. I was going to go to the military, get my leadership skills, because that's the thing that's going to differentiate me on my resume. Get out of the Army after 4 years, go to a corporation, a bank, do something, and stay there for 20, 40 years, however long, collect my retirement, et cetera. So that was the plan, man. So I did 4 years of that in college, where it's the 4-year training program where they, get you into the military. And then when I finally went in, did 4.5 years there, about 2.5 years in Georgia, about 2 years down here in Florida where I did recruiting. And then when I was in Georgia, I was what we call an infantry officer. So that's like boots on the ground, like you lead those types of guys. It's not as cool as it sounds, right? It's not.
A lot of walking, right?
Oh my gosh, a lot of walking, a lot of late nights, lightning, thunder, getting just rained on, good times that I'll never forget. But I knew, even when I was in the military, and this is the one thing I learned a lot, I was very fortunate to have a really great leaders around me that allowed me to pursue things outside of just the military. And that's something that unfortunately a lot of people can't do in the military because their leadership, and I'm sure it's like this wherever in their job, they can't pursue something that they want to because the leadership that's above them is not understanding of it at all. No, you have to be 100% focused here, 100%. So I was lucky enough to have leaders that said, hey, get your work done here, and I fully support you over there.
Yeah.
And that's why I was able to balance it really well, because I had people around me that supported me. And now that's something that I really carry forward. I always tell my team, I'm like, my goal is not for you to stay here forever, right? I hope you graduate onto something bigger and better, because to me, that's a win, because I just had so many people around me that supported me to push me to do more beyond just what I was currently doing at the moment. So yeah, I did my time there, but I always knew that there was going to be a next step, and I'm a big believer in God. So I just always listened to that, and I listened to the nudges. And as I continued to get nudges, I just followed down that path. And then it's led me to this point, man. So military was good. It definitely built a lot of character, learned a lot of leadership skills and stuff like that. But I knew God was calling me to do something outside of the military. There's guys, I met guys, and I love them. The thing I miss about the military, the people. It's just people that are just focused on one common mission. You could trust everybody that's around you. You're always going to have that one guy that's, that's anywhere you go. But you never have to worry about, do these people have my back 100%? And I'm not saying I worry about that now. But what I am saying is that those people were just the best. And they're from all over: Alaska, South Carolina, California, Guam. But we're all in this for the common mission. So it taught me so much about culture as well, which I think is building a culture and shared hardship and just things that you can't learn from a book, So it was a good experience, man. I am so happy that I did it, and I met so many phenomenal people along the way.
So you could pursue things on the side. Did you immediately start with the storytelling?
Started with OnlyFans. No, I'm just kidding. So
that's why everybody was allowing you to do extra. So fucking check him out.
No, funny enough, I was one of those 20, growing up, like I told you, I wanted to be a big motivational speaker. So how I got into the whole, I don't even know if I told you that, but one of the things that just helped me overcome my bullying was I would just go on YouTube and I would just type in motivational videos, and I would just brainwash myself.
Who did you watch?
I watched David Goggins a lot, Gary Vee a lot. I watched Eric Thomas a lot, Les Brown, Inky Johnson. These are some of the guys that and then old guys, Jim Rohn.
You're 27?
27, yeah.
Did you still get Greg Plitt?
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me?
I was, maybe you're too young for that stuff.
No, man, he's gone too early, unfortunately, man. That dude would pump me up incredibly well. And then old timers like Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, all of the old guys, Bob Proctor, all of these old timers as well. Yeah, Greg was amazing, man. I still listen to his stuff in the gym, on runs, on walks. It's awesome. And once again, just listening to those messages, I heard someone say recently, the words that you say to yourself are hypnosis. And I was like, that is so true. And another one of my mentors, he says, what you tune into, you turn into. And when I started tuning into all of those positive messages, I started turning into a different person. My whole reality changed. So I say that to share that when I was growing up, I wanted to be that person for other people. So I want to be this big motivational speaker. That brought me to finally when I are you familiar with Clubhouse?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Clubhouse was really big a few years ago during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I went on it for the first time. I was invited on by, at the time you needed an invite to join, by some person I knew. And the first person I saw that was in there was a guy by the name of Les Brown, which in America, he's one of the...
You weren't even there with Les Brown. That's crazy.
Yeah. So for me, I was a total fangirl moment. He was oh my God. He was the one guy that I listened to religiously. So to see him, it was like seeing the reincarnation of God. So I was oh my God. long story short, he started talking about this program he started because people made some really good money on Clubhouse back in the day. Like, it was cool. And he's like, I'm putting together this program, Hungry to Speak. I'm going to teach you how to speak on stage. I'm going to tell you to monetize your message. I'm going to help you get gigs. And for me, as like a 21 or 2-year-old kid at the time, having the dream of becoming a motivational speaker at the time, I was like, oh my God, I can get trained by this guy that I've been watching for all of these years. And then he said, and the good part is it only costs $297. And I said, oh, that sounds fair. And then he said, per month. And I said, whoa, right? Because me growing up, like, we didn't have car payments that were $297 a month. You don't invest that type of money in your education. And plus, I was just in the military. I just bought a house, just bought a car. Like, all this stuff was going on. I did not have $297 a month. So I called my dad. I said, Dad, you know Les Brown? He says, of course. I said, he's offering this coaching program, Hungry to Speak. He's going to teach me how to speak. He's going to teach me how to do all these things. He said, great, do it. I said, there's one problem. He said, well, what is it? I said, it's $297 a month. He said, you have the money, right? I said, no. He said, you want me to lend you the money? I said, Dad, you've done enough for me. My parents are the type of people, they always will do more for their kids than they will themselves.
Yeah,
right?
Same here. Yeah,
that's so many parents out there, right?
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
So I said, no, Dad. I took out my credit card that I got when I was, don't judge me for this, okay? I got it when I was 17 years old, 34% interest on it.
Oh, that's just predatory.
Yeah, 100%. I held it up in front of me and I asked myself the question. I said, are your goals and your dreams worth it? I said, yeah. Let me try 1 month. I put it in. Oh, 2 weeks later, I get an email. Sign up here for your onboarding call. Terrible onboarding process. How dare they make me wait 2 weeks? Anyways.
Yeah, nowadays you would like, Trustpilot will be wrecked, Reddit will be wrecked.
Yeah, Reddit would be wrecked, charge back, the whole 9 yards. I sign up for a time. I get on the call, and it's Les Brown on the call.
Oh, that's crazy.
On Zoom, just me and him. I'm like,
in a suit?
Yes, in a suit. He always wears a suit.
Epic. Yeah, it's so epic.
And he says, he doesn't say hi. He doesn't say, how you doing? Thanks for joining. He says one thing, son, what do you want to do with your voice? Without hesitation, I said, sir, I'm going to be the greatest speaker in the world. And he said, it looks like we got a lot of work to do. But all of this transpired. And the reason why I bring this up is because it leads to me starting Storypreneur. So I started sharing my story after I started getting coaching on Clubhouse. I started participating more, sharing my story. And I remember this one woman, Heidi Wild. She lives in Massachusetts. I haven't talked to her in years. And she sent me a DM. She said, Deven, have you ever thought about teaching people this? I said, teaching people what? She said, teaching people how to share their story. I said, Heidi, I don't do that. I just share my stories. I'm the speaker. She said, okay. I just thought it would be a good question to ask. So I got off Clubhouse. I went to go check my Chase Bank app, and I had -$7, okay? I was so broke at the time. I went to a fast food restaurant. I got a medium cookies and cream milkshake. I handed them my debit card, and they said, sir, it's $3.69. I said, here you go. And they said, sorry, sir, it did not work. I said, try one more time. It did not work. I said, it must be something with your machine. They said, sir, do you have another card? I said, yes, here you go. I handed them a credit card. They said, sir, that one went through. And it was at that moment that I knew I was really broke because I couldn't even get a milkshake. So when I went and I looked and I saw -$7, you know what I thought? Maybe she's up to something. So I went back to her. I said, do you really think I could do this? Do you really think people would be interested? Yeah. So what ended up happening, I started my own Clubhouse communities, started hosting my own rooms, talking about storytelling. And I opened up. I didn't have a name for it at the time. It wasn't called Storypreneur, which it eventually came into. I started a community for like $119 a month. Don't ask me how I came up with that number. And that was the first thing I really ever monetized was that. But it was like such a long journey. You know, it's funny. I had a stint along the way where I became a life coach at like the age of 20.
That's a little bit cringe, a little bit.
It is 100%. It's very cringy.
I didn't want to insult you.
It's very cringy. I did a certification program, and I was like, I need to get my certificate and all of these different things. You know, but I share that to say I always had that desire to like, I just loved personal development. I always loved hearing people's stories. And that's why now, being where I am, it's like I can help people craft that story, but the fact that I can actually help them share that story, the thing I love most, a client will come to me and they'll be like, hey, I just want to let you know, I got this message. This person just said that they did not take their life because they heard me on that podcast.
Yeah, it's deep, yeah.
That's so much bigger than what money can provide, man.
Yeah, communication is beautiful.
I love it, dude.
Whether it's somebody who doesn't kill themselves or somebody who makes
a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it, it's the thing that shaped all of humanity is our ability to communicate, right? And especially as a business owner, man, like I don't got to tell you, you're a master at it. It has the ability to change the trajectory of your, like we're talking about, like the small things though, like our pace, our pitch, our tonality, our downward inflections, to make sure that someone understands that this is something more serious that they have to lean into. And then when I get really excited about something, they know that I'm really sharing something that's like really exciting. They need to tune in. And this is so like it's an art form. And I remember I'll share this last thing. 2 things. Like probably 3 things. 3 biggest things.
Let's make it 5.
3.
We have time.
It's 3. It's 3. Okay. The 3 biggest lessons I've learned, most of them from Les Brown. You never tell a story without a point, and you never tell a point without a story. You never tell a story without a point, and you never tell a point without a story. Number 2, this is one that I came up with. God, you know how it works sometimes? Like God just like plants things in you, and like, bro, where did that come from? Verbalize what they internalize. When you're communicating, make sure that you're verbalizing out loud the things that your people are thinking inside, but would never dare say to anybody else. Right? So it would be like something like, man, and I was just sitting there on the edge of the bed and I was just thinking to myself, how am I going to get through this? I don't know what's coming next. They're thinking that, but they would never say that out loud. So the fact that you verbalized what they internalize immediately makes them feel like they could trust you. And then the last thing is, the greatest speakers make the fewest words go the furthest. You don't have to just ramble on forever and ever. How can you fit as much into as little? Totally changed my life, man. So just like, I love it because I look back at I got to send you one, Facebook videos of I would post like these motivational rants because I was watching Gary Vee and he would go on these motivational rants. I was like, I'm going to do that. So I was 16 in my backyard at like February in New York City with a trench coat on, doing these motivational, and I talked like I was from New York. And now I look back at those and I'm like, how did I transform my voice, literally my voice from that? And it's just such a skill, man. And it's a beautiful one. The cool thing is you never stop developing it. Like I have so much to learn, but the fact that I've made so much progress, it's like, wow. And the last thing is there's a mirror that the audience can't see it, but I'll never forget, man. I was preparing for a TEDx talk. And I told Les Brown about it. I said, Les, I'm preparing for this TEDx talk. I said, I'm going to practice in the mirror. And he says, I got to tell you one thing. Unless you practice in front of a pair of trained eyes and trained ears, that mirror is not going to do a damn thing for you. Because if you look back in that mirror, all that's going to be looking back at you is someone that doesn't know what to fix. So the fact that I got coaching in this regard changed everything from me. You could read books, you could speak in the mirror, but like he said, unless you have a pair of trained eyes and trained ears that know the exact feedback to give you, it's a very hard skill to improve upon unless you have that person in your life.
Yeah. Were those the 3 points already?
I actually kind of gave 4 there.
Yeah, I got so caught up in the story that I was like, are we at 2 or at 4?
Yeah, I gave a few there for sure. Like, but what I want to say, like, never tell a story without a point, never tell a point without a story.
Yeah.
Verbalize what they internalize. The greatest speakers make the fewest words go the furthest. And then the 4th one, I don't even remember what the 4th one was.
The 4th one was you need somebody with the ears and
Boom.
eyes. Yeah.
Right? You can't just speak in the mirror. In other words, you need a pair of trained eyes and ears looking at you to give you the proper feedback so that you can grow. And I remember I asked him a question one day. I said, because what happened was there was a group coaching program that I joined, $297 a month. But what ended up happening was we grew a very tight relationship. Like he had my phone number, I had his phone number, he would call me, he would text me. It kind of became like a father figure at a point. And I asked him one day, I said, why are you doing this for me? I think this is such a big point for the audience. He says, because you never fight me on any feedback that I give you. You just implement it. I was like, wow, that's what happens. And that's the thing I've learned, man, in life. Mentors will take a special liking to mentees that unequivocally just do what they say, as long as it's ethical and moral, of course. And that's how you differentiate yourself. Like in any of these we're all in programs, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to differentiate yourself, be that guy that posts 16 times a day. Be that person that does all of these different things. And sure enough, your heroes will become your acquaintances, eventually your friends. And in my case, a lot of them have eventually become clients, which is like crazy. But yeah, man, communications and art, a skill that I deeply care about. And that's why like so much of what I do with my clients, I'm like, dude, if you, like, I'll get you on those podcasts. That's why you hired me. But if you want to get the most out of this, man, this is where your attention needs to be.
And this is the perfect segue into the pitch. So you're not helping people with communication anymore, do you, right? It's only the podcast service. So if they want to learn from you, work with you, then the only thing they can do, sign up and do the podcasting, and then that's included in there. Or how can you help the audience?
Yeah,
the listeners,
I mean,
the
it's
viewers?
very simple, right? So what we do now is we help clients with really three aspects. We help people get booked on podcasts. But we need to facilitate and we need to optimize around what I call the different phases of the podcast. What do you do before the podcast, on the podcast, after the podcast? Before the podcast, how do you prepare successfully so that when you go on it, you're dialed in? Number two, optimizing your performance on the podcast, the biggest one. How are you strategically guiding that conversation so that the person that's on the receiving end says to themselves, wow, this is something that I absolutely need to listen to. It's relevant for my life and I trust this person enough to buy. The art of story selling. Right? Sounds very generic. We've all heard that term, but it's true. How do you sell through the stories that you tell? And then number three, how do you deploy the content from the podcast inside of your organic and paid marketing, as well as your sales process? Because the reason why I say that is because what happens to a lot of people, they go on the podcast and they'll get a spike, but then it dies. So how do we extend the lifetime of your podcast so you continue to reap the rewards and get an ROI from how you're strategically deploying the full-length podcast, but also clipping it up strategically? So now you're getting mind share in the minds of your audience, right? And there's a bunch of different strategies that we use and teach and all of these different stuff. We could sit here freaking forever. So it's really simple. I think one of the most valuable things that I would love to do for your audience, and it took me 2.5 years to build this thing, and I tremble as I say this because I've literally not given it away before, and it's very valuable to my team. It is my podcast database I have like 765 entrepreneurship podcasts in there and business podcasts. And I assume that most of the people that listen to this are in entrepreneurship and business. And I would love to just give it to them. It has all of the information that they need for every single one of those podcasts to reach out as easily as humanly possible, right?
Sounds
all they got to
amazing.
do to get it, just go to my Instagram. It's going to be Deven Rod, Devenrod, Deven Rod, Devenrod. And what I want them to do is I want me to send them the word Robin, okay? Because that's how I'm going to know that they came from this podcast, because you literally cannot find this anywhere, right? So just DM me the word Robin, and I'll send you the entrepreneurship. What we use, no BS. What my team uses internally when we're pitching our clients on podcast. Just give it to you guys so you guys can go off. And the reason why I do that, quite frankly, is because I deeply give a shit about helping people get their story out into the world. And if there's somebody that's watching this, like, Deven, just do it for me. Of course, we could have that conversation. But my primary goal is to help as many people in this world get their story out to as many people that need it in this world.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So thanks for being here. You were quite quick. We decided on this at 3 p.m. or like 2 p.m. I was like in a call, secretly booking the podcast still, and then I had to travel here for 1.5 hours, and you had to bounce, and I was like, half an hour late. So thanks a lot for that. And for everybody else, if you want to hear more interesting conversations on how to scale your business, do proper marketing, sales, and business, then make sure to subscribe and drop in the comments if you want me to interview another guest. So thanks for having me again, and hopefully we'll catch up in a year and we talk about the next progression and plateau that you're gonna.
Man, you're the man, brother. Thanks so much for having me on. I can honestly say this: you've been the best host that I've had the experience of sitting next to. So I really do appreciate that, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And thanks for watching and listening.